Boom! Welcome, Dan Hooker Podcast Episode 5. There's two hands out back, 5. Episode 5. Welcome. So, there's a lot to talk about today. A few UFC events come and gone. We're going to get into the Holly Holm Aldana fight. What else was coming up? The big Sandhagen Moraes card. And so the first half, we're going to cover all the international stuff, and then we're going to get into what's happened locally. A couple big shows here in New Zealand in this past weekend with Shuriken Fight Series, which is the biggest show in the North Island in New Zealand, and also King of the Ring. So King of the Ring, if you don't know, you should know. That's the biggest combat sports show in New Zealand, where we showcase the top talent. But we're going to get into that later. First, we'll talk about the Holly Holm Aldana card. So the highlight of that for me was really Holly Holm's corner. That right there, the commentators mentioned it, but that is a well-oiled machine. I thoroughly enjoyed when they cut back to the corner. Winklejohn would talk, get his message across. There was affirmation from Holly Holm. Then it passes over to Jackson. Same thing, Holly Holm gives an affirmation. Then Israel Martinez, a wrestling coach, would give another piece of advice like bang, bang, bang. And that, like they were saying, takes 20 years. That's 20 years of those people being in your corner and giving you that advice for you to accept. Because that was a lot of advice to get across. 3 people speaking at once, or one after another. There's a lot of information coming across, but they're in the gym with you every day for the last 2 decades. So then all of that information is not only set across, but absorbed. So that was an incredibly dominant victory over Irene Aldana. I thought Aldana would give her a much better go than that, but it just shows Holly Holm's ring craft. And I think Aldana needs to work on cutting off the cage a little bit. She just followed her for 25 minutes, followed her. Holly Holm would draw her in, blitz in, attack, punch the shit out of her forearms, and then back on her bike. And eventually, forces Aldana to get a little more aggressive. And she started getting clipped with the kicks. Last round, that was the most dominant. I actually thought Holly Holm had a good chance of stopping it, had a good chance of getting out of there. But again, Holly Holm moves forward. Carlos Felipe, Jürgen de Crass. I did quite enjoy the first 2 rounds of that contest before it turned into a bit of a rugby match, really. Jürgen de Castro just charging forward. Felipe could have he got the victory, but Felipe was complaining all in the world. Oh, he's just pushing me back. Like you should be able to stop someone just running forward and pushing you against the cage. You can step left, can step right. You don't just purely have to stand your ground and exchange punches. Entertaining matchup for the heavyweights. Another one I want to get into, Jermaine Duraname with put her to sleep. I thought that her technical difficulties. Juliana Pena, her defense was very interesting. The way she was blocking the shots, like she was very aware of Jermaine's right hand, so she was dipping very low to get out of it. Did a great job to avoid what comes after that. Generally, when you dip that low, you got to watch out for the knees and elbows and things like that when you're drawing that low. But she did a good job. But yeah, submission. She kind of just gave her a neck in the third round. Led to the submission. Carlos Condit back on the win. A five fight lose streak. Turned that around. Man, he's one of my favorites. One of my favorites of all time. I remember being in and watching Carlos Condit versus Robbie Lawler live in Las Vegas. That was probably the best live UFC experience I've ever had, watching that Carlos Condit, Robbie Lawler. Round 5, Robbie Lawler was in his prime, coming on hard. That was incredible to watch. Oh, shout out to our local Josh Culibao. He ended up with a draw against Charles Jourdain, but I feel like Culibao definitely proved that he belongs in the UFC and that he can compete with people at that level. When he was initially matched with Charles Jourdain, he's no joke. That's a tough competitor. Definitely UFC caliber. Josh, definitely UFC caliber. Bit unfortunate on the draw, but I'm very excited to see him get back in there and contest again. I feel like Josh is finding his feet in the UFC. He took an incredibly tough call on his UFC debut, fighting someone that was 6'12", 84 kilos, and he's only a featherweight. So hats off to him. Can't wait to see him back in there. That was actually, that was a funny one when Charles Jourdain had told the matchmakers, or because it must have been the first time he experienced the Dana speech. And if you don't know, once you all weigh in and you go up on stage and you face off with your opponent or whatever like that, they take you out back into a room, and they take you out back, and it's called the Dana speech. But if like Dana White's not there, because he's not generally there, he's a busy guy. Like Sean Shelby will do it, but like Sean Shelby's is way more chill. Sean Shelby or Mick Maynard will do it, but his one's like way more chill. Sean Shelby's just like, oh yeah, there's bonuses on the line, so go out there, give it your best. But yeah, we appreciated it, and thank you very much. Like his one's like super chill, but like I've experienced a couple Dana speeches where you come out back, Dana walks in like fired up, and he's just like, there's 50 grand on the line. What would you do with 50 grand? 50 grand could change your life. You could win 2 bonuses. You could win performance of the night. You could win fight of the night. That's 100 grand. What could you do with 100? Like he gets a real fired up. And the first one I ever experienced with Dana, like his veins are popping out of his head. Like he was getting like real fired up. And Mike Perry was in the room. Mike Perry was in the room as he's doing the Dana speech. And Mike Perry like starts like standing up. Mike Perry's standing up, just like barking like a dog, like, oh, like Dana's saying, change your life, change your life. Mike Perry's tearing the fucking roof off. It was quite the experience. I'm not going to lie. So I definitely understand why Charles Jourdain went out there and tried to make himself 100 grand. Walks away with the draw. We're on to the next one. So coming up, there's Mariah Sandhagen. That's my boy, Corey Sandhagen. So I trained with Corey when I was over in Denver at Elevation Fight Team. I think he was only like, Corey at the time was like 2-0 as a professional. So he only had 2. Well, he's 12-2 now as a professional. When I was there, he was 2-0 as a professional. And like the first time he ever caught my eye, he was in there like sparring with TJ. And he was like, I was like, who's that guy? Because he was like lighting TJ up. And I was like, TJ was like the bantamweight champ at the time. He was the man. He was the king of the castle. And Sandhagen was out there like lighting him up like a Christmas tree. And I was like, who the heck is that kid? But like the gym at the time, everyone knew that he was like the next big thing. And everyone knew that he was like a future world champion. I still believe it. That's an incredibly tough matchup. But from my perspective, Corey, to me, outside of like Israel, has some of the best footwork and some of the most tools to choose from. Mariah's very, very powerful striker, very heavy-handed. But again, like I feel like his tool shed is a bit limited compared to Corey. So I think that Corey will just get the better of him because he has so many different tools that he can pick and choose from. Yeah, it wasn't until... Oh, that was actually a funny one. I was on Corey's podcast. I was over supporting for the Israel for his fight against Yoel Romero. And while I was in Vegas, I think I'd arrived the day before, Corey asked if I'd come in and be on his podcast. And I was there. And he's like, man, do you remember kicking me in the face and then my tooth coming through my cheek? And I was like, nah, I don't remember. And then he started describing the scene more. And he's like, yeah, you like got a kick and it like the toe just clipped, but like put like a hole through his lip. I didn't remember doing that. I apologize to him on his podcast, so I'm not going to do that again. Edson Barboza, Makwan Americani. Tough fight for Edson because Makwan's just such an incredible grappler. Very similar to his last opponent, Dan Ige, I would have to say, Makwan Americani. So it's going to be a tough. That's an interesting fight. That's an interesting fight for Barboza. His kind of back is against the wall. Moved down to featherweight. Lost his first fight at featherweight, which was close. I actually had Edson winning that fight against Dan Ige, but it's the way that the fight game goes. So much is left to perspective. Tough contest for Barboza. I don't know how I'm leaning towards that one. It'll be interesting to see if Edson can find his place in that division. Ben Rothwell, Mason Tobur. Ben Rothwell, I think he's one of the better heavyweights roaming around. I actually credit Ben Rothwell quite a lot. What's he been doing? Gone too far. 2-fight win streak. Stefan Struve punches. Split decision over OSP. So not a heavily impressive. Oh, this is a fight I'm interested for. Dricus du Plessis. So he's against Marcus Perez, Brazilian guy. So Dricus is the EFC champion. So if you don't know, EFC is like the big show out of South Africa. I've been hearing some things that they're not doing so well at the moment. But that's a very interesting signing for the UFC. I actually trained with him when we were in Thailand at Tiger Muay Thai. I spent some time with him in the gym. Big guy for featherweight. He's a big guy, 6 foot, 76-inch reach. Yeah, he's a big guy. That's welterweight, yeah. 2-fight win streak. Yeah, EFC champion. If you don't know, watch some EFC fights. They're incredible fights. Very exciting card. Ooh, there's another fight. Giga Chikadze against Omar Marias. Giga, 10-2. He was a glory kickboxer, and he's on quite the streak. He's on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC. I would say one of the best strikers at featherweight. If you want to watch one of the best strikers do his thing, Giga Chikadze in Glory. Those are some incredible fights to watch. Now he's fighting Omar Marias, undefeated. Fighting out of Hard Knocks 365. 2-0 in the UFC. Very impressive. Man, he's got some incredible finishes on his record. That is a highlight. Keep an eye on that fight. That's a big one. So moving a little closer to home, there's actually a one championship fight which features Anzac fighters quite heavily, and that's the one championship Reign of Dynasties. So it's not an incredibly deep card. ONE FC is running these shows, and they're only running there's 6 fights on this one. I think the last show they did in Bangkok. So they're running no crowd fights in Bangkok. There was 5 fights on their last card. This one's got 6 fights. But it heavily is showcasing Anzac athletes. Reese McLaren in the co-main event versus Alexei Toyovin. So Reese McLaren, now this is an Aussie that's been in there for a very long time. He's been fighting in ONE FC since 2015. He's had some pretty good results. I think he fought for the title. So that'll be interesting. Co-main event spot against an undefeated opponent. Keep your eye on that card. Watch that card, Reese McLaren. And then the main event, it's actually for the title. So the ONE FC flyweight title, and it has a tie versus Josh Tonner, the Australian. So Josh is from Canberra in Australia. He's one of the very best kickboxers at that weight in Australia. He's doing some big things in ONE FC. He's 2-0 in ONE FC. So he's on a 2-fight win streak, fighting for the title of 125 pounds. So that's about 57 kilos. ONE FC. Keep your eye on that one. The Anzacs will be featuring heavily on that card. So that's a bit of what's coming up internationally. I wanted to get into the local stuff now. So there were two massive shows here in New Zealand on the weekend showcasing some of the very top talent. Saturday night, we'll get into Saturday night first. It was the Shuriken Fight Series card. There were two professional fights and there were two amateur title fights on the card as well. So Eli Tuifuavalu, he fought Cam Rolston. So Cam Rolston's out of City Kickboxing. He was 6-2 as a professional coming into that against Eli, and he extended that to 7-2 with the TKO win in the second round. The striking was pretty even in the first round. They were going back and forth, exchanging strikes, exchanging big right hands on each other. Cam took it to the ground in the second and just showed that the experience that he had on the ground. He was too strong, too dominant, chipped away. Eli was definitely there, to put up a fight. He wasn't going away easy. He showed a lot of toughness, but Cam just forced the referee to stop that contest. In the co-main event, there was a professional bantamweight fight between Logan Price and Nick Thornton. This was a very entertaining matchup. This is incredibly entertaining. Back and forth striking war. Both of them landing some good shots. These guys are very creative strikers. Logan Price with the TKO in the third round. So Logan got the win. And he didn't call him out. I don't want to say he wants to call him out, but he said he had his eyes on, there's another pro bantamweight fight coming up here in New Zealand between one of my fighters, Aaron Toe, and Caleb Lally. And he said he had his eyes locked on the winner of that. So he'll be watching that closely, and that's another fight I see. That's what we need to do to continue to develop on the local scene. It's not calling him out. It's just being honest with your intentions. I thought that was very cool of Logan. There was nothing disrespectful about it or anything like that. He wants to fight. He's a hungry young guy. He wants to fight. He wants to get back in there. So the easiest way that you can secure your next fight is let everyone know what you're thinking as well. So he's just letting everyone know what he's thinking, letting them know that he has his eyes on the other pro bantamweights, and it's what we need to do. It's what we need to do, especially while the borders are locked. The best need to fight the best. The boys, they need to stay active and stay competing. So that was very good. Now, amateur title fights. Anthony poaching Matt Taylor. Matt Taylor's tough as a rock. He's from Whangarei up north. So he took, that guy can take some shots. He's got one of the best chins in the country, I believe. With the featherweight title, Ollie Schmidt really stood out to me. I want to make a shout out to Ollie Schmidt. He impressed me quite a lot. Just the fluidity, creativity in his striking, his spinning attacks, jumping across the cage. I was very impressed with that. But I was so glad that we had such a big weekend for combat sports here in New Zealand. So the way they did it was they had 5. Because here in Auckland, if you don't know, we're living from overseas, the way we got around the coronavirus was limited to 100 people. But this was kind of, they separated the venue into 5 groups of 100 with 5 different entrances, had everything blocked off from one another. So, the fighters were able to fight, the promoters were able to put on a show, everyone was able to be entertained while still sticking within the coronavirus guidelines at the time. So I was very, it's just exciting to get back in there and see it live again. There's one thing watching it on TV, but nothing beats watching combat sports in the flesh. Hear the shots, see the blood. Can't be beat. Moving on. King of the Ring, Friday night. And this is the premier combat sports show here in New Zealand. This is Head and Shoulders. The winner, you win a King of the Ring, you move on to some very big things. Israel Adesanya is a King of the Ring champion. Carlos Ulberg's Blood Diamond, these are all King of the Ring champions. Israel and Carlos are both multiple-time winners of the event. So, you win King of the Ring, you get a lot of eyes on you. And this week, Nakora Likingi took it out again. So it was the lightweights, which is 62 kilos, and Nakora Likingi got the job done again. And it was a mirror event of the last one as well. So he fought Dominic Reed, who's his teammate. So that's Wayne Vaenga's their coach, and they're down in Christchurch. So Nakora and Dom met each other in the final. They met each other in the final of the last show. The biggest improvements for this was Dom. I think Dom Reed, man, he really impressed me. It was razor thin. The final between Dom and Nakora. I actually thought it was going to go to a fourth round. I couldn't pick a winner. It was so back and forth, so even. But massive improvements from Dom. Like, he, in a short space of time between the last King of the Ring event and this one, he showed some incredible improvements. So, man, if they do the 60 kilos again and those two in the final, Dom's improving. But, man, to have two stablemates get out there and both be the best guys in the country back to back, that's quite a feat. Fight of the night for me of that one was the super heavyweights. They were in the co-main event spot. David Tuitapo, the Goliath. What is he, 7 foot tall? I was at the weigh-in. He's 165 kilos. And he was fighting Thomas Piatto. I hadn't heard of Tom, but I definitely know who he is now. He's down at Hybrid MMA in Tauranga. Man, they put on a contest. Tom was swinging at him, had him rocked at the end of that first round. He connected with a few good shots, but Dave come back with a nice straight right in the second round. Sat him down, but that's an incredible contest. That's one I doubt it's very easy to find Dave opponents. I would love to see that fight run back. I know those boys, they were super heavyweights. They both took it on short notice. Man, I would love to see that fight again with a full training camp. But great night of fights. Yeah, that was so my boy Nate fought Eli Tuivavalu as well on this show. So Eli Tuivavalu fought on King of the Ring, and then he fought back-to-back in the main event of Shuriken against Cam on the Saturday night. So he fought the Friday night, and then he fought the Saturday night as well. And I was not confused. I was interested as to the reason or what motivated him to fight back-to-back like that, because that's not something that's incredibly recommended in combat sports. But it's hard to criticize anyone from the outside, because you really don't know what's going on. And yeah, it was a risk, but it's hard from the outside because I didn't know his reasoning. So I kind of held off any kind of criticism towards it until I had the reason behind him doing it and his motivation. And so after the fight, his coach actually put up the reason, and then it's quite hard to argue against that. So his nephew, Eli's nephew, I think he's 7-year-old, has a brain tumor, and he asked him to fight two combat sports back to back, night to night. And Eli just wanted to prove to his nephew like that he's strong and he's tough and show a bit of strength. So then his nephew will be, motivated and see that someone in his family is showing strength like that. And his coach said that he got him 2 fights, but Eli didn't like the fights as he thought they were too easy. So he wanted harder contests. So he fought my fighter Nate, and he fought Cam from CKB, which are two, individually, those are 2 incredibly hard fights. But to fight them both night after night, but now that I know Eli's reasoning for doing that, I tip my hat, and I have nothing but respect for Eli after such an impressive showing like that. So I tip my hat to that young man. We're going to get into some Twitter questions. Only a couple. There's a couple good questions. Camille Clark. Have you been training just in case of a last-minute call-up for this month's title fight? I am training, but I think, people have been asking that. They're just like, oh, you just train. There's training and then there's training. That's like, oh, I've been walking in the dairy a couple of times of the day. Yeah, I might jump into that marathon next week. There's a marathon coming up. I've been going to the dairy a couple of, like, there's training. Yeah, I am training. I train every day. I train 7 days a week. But there's training, and then there's training for 5-round UFC main event. So I think people underestimate a little bit of how much goes into it, how much goes into this kind of thing. So yes, I have been training. Am I ready for a 5-round title fight in a couple of weeks? Well, I wouldn't say no. Let's just leave it at that. I'm the kind of person that would walk to the dairy to train for a marathon. So, Christopher Reeve, if you're a matchmaker, what do you do with the top of the women's bantamweight division? Give Home another title shot, give Durandame another shot, have them fight, and the winner gets a shot, or wait for a new contender to emerge. Well, the champ Amanda Nunes is fighting Megan Anderson, defending her featherweight belt, so that puts her out for the time being. So I think Holly Holm and Jermaine Durandam should fight. I think that makes sense. I don't think either of them can sit there and wait for a title shot. I don't think either of them, coming off losses to Amanda Nunes, could just walk into a title shot without earning an overall victory. I don't see any of the other girls outside of the bantamweight, outside of those two, getting past those two. Those two are so experienced. I think they should fight. I think Holly Holm and Jermaine Durandam should fight. Winner gets a shot. Winner gets the next shot. Corey Watt, what do you think of the women's MMA scene in New Zealand? Is there any fighters you think could be close to signing with the UFC? Yes. So the women's MMA, you have to understand that things kind of seem to come in waves, and it's like generation. The women's MMA scene was very strong here in New Zealand. Faith McMahon, we had Kate Da Silva, and there were a lot of active professional women competing in New Zealand and in Australia. But then that generation kind of goes, and then the next generation's just coming through now in the amateur scene. So we have Michelle Montag, who's a 2-time gold medalist at the IMAF World Championship. So she's a back-to-back gold medalist in the World Championship. So I think Michelle Montag is, Monty, she'll be one to keep an eye on. I think she's going to do some big things in the pro scene, and I think it's inevitable that she'll be competing in the UFC. So yeah, the future is bright locally for the women's MMA scene. I definitely feel like we've got girls that could potentially be competing in the UFC in the next couple of years. So great question. One more. Soka 88R. Why don't more people utilize the liver shot in MMA? I feel like people who use it do it very well. Sandhagen, Aldo, etc. Because of knees and elbows. To punch someone in the body, you have to get in fairly close. You have to get pretty comfortable with it, what's coming back. And so it's to take a risk early when you don't know if someone's got a knee or elbow loaded waiting for you. And takedowns as well. It's just the body shot is generally from the infighting. Well, unless you're Jose Aldo and you jump halfway across the cage and elbow Jeremy Stevens. Liver shot Jeremy Stevens like that. That is a rare thing. So knees, elbows, and wrestling is why the liver shot is not utilized so heavily. Have I covered everything? Oh, I wanted to make a shout out to all my Russian fans for hitting me up again. They're back. The Russians have invaded my comments once again. I think I pissed them off a while ago with Islam Makhachev. I think I said something about Islam Makhachev. It's funny, you don't even have to be that mean to get them like real riled up and pissed off. But I know I should have learned from that experience. You don't piss off Russian MMA fans. But I pissed them when apparently I snitched on Khabib last week. So last week's show, if you remember, I snitched on Khabib because he didn't quarantine. My whole team quarantined for 48 hours in Abu Dhabi. Before they were allowed out into Fight Island, Khabib skipped quarantine or didn't quarantine, or no one answered my question anyway. But I woke up in the morning and I'm just like, I see all these comments like popping up from like Russian accounts just going, snitch, snitch, die, snitch, lady snitch. And I was like, what the? Like, I was just replied to one of them like, whoa, okay, like, what have I done? What have I done? Fuck you, Hooker. You lose. Don't touch Khabib Nurmagomedov. Okay, you pussy. The Russians come for you, mate. What's this one? You denounce Khabib, and after that you say you are a normal fighter? It is woman's business to knock, which is what you do. Poirier didn't kill you in vain. That's a very serious. Them Russians come serious. Anyway, I don't think I snitched. I simply feel like I was asking a question. My question was not answered. And I hope that appeases my Russian. Nah, I actually don't care that much. I actually don't care if they get my comments to call me a pussy. I will survive. That's another show. Join me next week. And I might have a guest. I don't know. I can't convince anyone to come on my show. See you later.